We will continue our program. We're going to hear from representatives from the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, from Johnny Selected Seeds, and from High Mowing Organic Seeds.
And I'm just going to talk about some things around the end, like how the heck do you get into this and make it work with a seed company? I will tell you something about how to make seed companies love you. Be truthful and prompt about any problems you ever have. People love it when you send them a picture of the crop and tell them something. It's great. There's this problem, etc. If they give you some forms to fill out ahead of time, do it promptly, because they want people who pay attention and are timely. And if you think the questions are silly, it's okay, because it might be a test. Anyway, so that's something to keep in mind. And various people have said that, and it's like dating. You know, you're building up this relationship because they're trusting you to grow something that they can sell, and you're trusting them to give you some money a long time after you put the stuff in the ground. So, you know, yeah. But there are a few things that we use. One is, you know, keeping records. It's secretive. Like, you know, what are the seed yields and stuff? You can't find this stuff out hardly. But you should ask whoever you're contracting with whatever they know, because some things really don't have any seeds. And, you know, you need to sort of, if they admit to it, you know, you need to work out something on the price, or you're probably going to lose money right away. And if you keep good records, you know, as you go along, you're having something. All the time I think, I'm going to do a project and get a lot of share data so that everybody at least has more of an idea of what the range of what they can get is. Anyway, so let's look at another one. Edmund's here. He can tell you lots of good things about crops he's grown. This is stuff from Edmund too. And I put this up again. There's going to be 3 slides that are really about this. And it's like mostly pointing out that there's a bit of, you know, variability of what you can get. I guess I got this when I first started from this little booklet about seed saving that was put out by farm folks, city folks in British Columbia. And that was like the first thing I ever found that just wrote down what you could expect. Well, and as was mentioned here, it can be way south or north of those numbers, okay? Here's some more stuff from my friend Edmund. Did I tell you I love people who keep records? It's so great. And this is another one that just kind of point out that things can be similar, but they can be quite varied in the yield that you get from a crop in the same area. Okay, move on. And here's another one. So what I'm saying is this will probably make or break whether you're going to make it as a beginning. And taking these small crops to begin with, if you really don't have experience, is a, well, to me, the best way to learn something. Okay. So, you know, you can expect that when you begin, you might not make very much money per hour. And we're going to assume that if you, and you might make less than this if you make some mistake, and you're gonna learn which crops produce seed well in your area, and hopefully you will have gotten some advice from the people you're working with what to give a try on, and they're going to try to get you, like me, to grow some things that aren't the greatest, but hopefully they can make up for it in various ways. And various ways as a small company that we make up with, and that some do, is the payment cycle is kind of wonky. And so sometimes we, with people we've worked with a bit, will pay part of the money before the time that we have all the information to know for the total crop, so that the money that we got from customers is out between us. And I think the bigger the company is, the more likely that they really have their act together. The less that kind of shenanigans happens. And it's part of who's taking the risk. If someone is small and they're asking you to take a risk with them, not everyone, but often they're willing to do that in some way that is tangible. And it's not, it's something for you to look at in what you're getting, from people. On the other hand, when people mention that if somebody gives you some seed that's really a mess, that is the kind of time when I think a reputable, person will sit in, because it's their problem as much as your problem. But sometimes if it's your problem that you haven't been taking care of the crop and stuff, well, you know what happens. You signed the contract. Okay. Something else that people can do when they're first starting is looking for double dipping, getting something where you can grow a bigger crop and have some guaranteed organic market. And we help people like with corn or something for these artisan bakers and so forth, so that they can grow a big enough crop, and total make an okay amount of money, even though we aren't buying as much seed as they might want. Okay, next one. And then some people do things with cucurbits where they, and this kind of has to do with someone who's transitioning. They're doing market stuff and they sell the squash whole at a market, at a place, and they go in. This is like, say, one customer in particular does a weekly special for 3 months, and they bring it in. They scoop out the seeds in the store, so you're not getting into health department things, and take the seeds home and sell the squash at a slightly higher price because they did the cutting up and cleaning. It's crazy things like that. But these are not things, these are things for how you make these little contracts make some money for you. And another thing that people do, we want to get people to go to Collards. I don't know how many people know, it's such a wonderful southern crop. And we suggest to them the highest price time for fresh collards is like in November, and you got to winter these over. So starting in late summer, putting them at a foot, spacing so you can have nice plants for November. Going through and picking your mother plants and tagging them and then selling the rest of them at the highest time makes it worthwhile to grow this seed crop, for example. And sharing that kind of stuff is good. So I tell you about the communication. This was put out by OSA a while back, and it was just some of the things that seed companies, care about, and that you might want to, keep in mind when you're, thinking about how to do it. The bigger the contracts, the more this stuff matters. So, yeah. And these are the things that you need to answer these questions, like who is going to provide the stock seed, and, what's going to happen if there's any problems with it. And generally speaking, even with companies like our side, we provide the stock seed unless it is something like, say, Friend Edmund, who has a variety that they have selected and maintained, and we're making a contract, but it's like we're also buying from another small seed company, but that kind of thing. The price, and they say, ask those questions about seed yield and off types and stuff like that. And the more that a company doesn't have as much experience with that variety, the more you should be a little careful about those, or take on a small contract so you can learn from firsthand experience about it. Timing of payments, in the best of time, you get paid a long time after you make this contract. And making agreements about what's going to happen is important so that you know. And then the quality standards, what kind of testing is going to be done, so that you know this, who's going to pay for it. This is important. And what happens in the case of a crop failure, did I tell you when you have the first problem, you're going to tell your seed company? Because, you're more likely, if you've been working together to resolve a problem, to get some help if things don't go the way you wanted them to be. And also just knowing early helps it not cost the seed company. If you lie about a crop and they put in the catalog, it causes so much problems for everybody. Oh, let me tell you.
You're over.
Yeah.
It's all over.
Yeah. So anyway, you need to see if there's any special things they want, like if there's going to be more roguing than 5 or 10%. You need to know ahead of time that about that if they know it. And I guess, yeah, okay. These are some little scraps from different contracts, and shoot, I lost my piece of paper. Okay, well, so, and I believe that we're actually going to put some of these contracts up so you can read the whole thing on eOrganic where the webinar is.
Exactly.
Yeah, they'll be up there. And so, this one from So True, the 2 sections from So True, that's pretty much a whole contract. With other bigger companies, it's gonna be like 4 or 5 pages of stuff. So that also gives you an idea of, what things people care about and so forth. Yeah, and here's another one. This is an old high mowing one. You're going to get the brand new spiffy one on eOrganic, so you can see that. And what I was going to point out about this is, right on, they start talking, about things that they might do that a smaller company is not so likely to do, like the field inspections if you're at a distance, or asking you to get stuff tested in certain ways. And yeah, timing, they tell you straight up, if you don't pay attention to getting the things in on time, you may be subject to not getting your money. So these kinds of things. Let's see, I think there's another one. Baker Creek is interesting. They let you know that they're kind of a hippie company. They say, and you can get paid part of it as a gift certificate at twice the amount that we owe you. Because many of the people that are growing for them is sort of preservation, and they're kind of the Wild West of seed companies in both directions, because you're more likely to end up with messed up stock seed that you got to do something about too. So, nice people, but, keep these things in mind. Here's a little chart, and that I put together with the help from cooperating seed companies. This is like maybe 5 years ago. I was going to do a new one, but then I started having health problems and didn't get around to it. But it gives you an idea. The thing that really lets you know is it gives you an idea of the size contracts that companies were. And I actually made some hard copies of that are on that table, and you can grab one when we have a break if you want to. And, sort of if you're courting a company, finding out the range of contracts that they're interested in at the time will kind of help, is another thing that can help you see if it's a good fit for you. And I think that, is there another one? That might be the, here are some people. Is Melanie still the person?
No, it's Jacob.
Jacob. Yes. I didn't get a chance to look at the new contract. So I just anyway, before. But that will have the right contact information on it. So go on eOrganic and get the real deal. And these are people who can help you at these seed companies.
Hey, so I'm Pete Zook from Johnny Seeds. I'm a product manager there, which means I distill a lot of information down to decide what's going to go in the catalog each year and how those products are going to be represented. And we have 4 product managers, 2 for vegetables, 1 for flowers and herbs and farm seed, and 1 for the tools and supplies section. And I work with about half of the vegetable crops. I'm not a seed producer myself, and I'm fortunate that we have our production manager, Mike Brown, who was able to join us kind of last minute, which is great. When I was asked to do this, I thought, well, sure, I'll see what I can do. It would be awfully nice if Mike could come, though, because he's the one who deals directly with our seed vendors and producers. So he's the one making the contract. So he's going to ride shotgun here, and he's got a mic to help answer some questions, too. So again, I work more on the commercial side of things and get involved with marketing a lot. But I do spend a tremendous amount of time on the research farm, looking at crops, working with our product technicians who run the trials to get to the bottom of what's good. And ultimately, I'm in on the deciding what it is that we're going to source, where we're going to source things from, who are good partners to work with. So I work with Mike quite a bit, going back and forth on how things are going with particular production vendors. And so there's a lot of troubleshooting that we all get involved with. So that's where I really learn this craft, I guess. How do I work this here? Just like this? All right. So what I thought I would do, I don't want to get too into the weeds on these slides, but I just wanted to provide some basically cut and pasted stuff from our contracts, similar to what Ira just did, to give you an idea of the things that we need from our production vendors. And the first one is just a basic rundown of some basic specs. We have minimum germination requirements in the contract. There's a purity requirement, which is one that is often tough to meet for folks who are just getting into it. I think folks don't realize how clean the seed actually has to be. Over 99% pure. When you have something that's 99.2% pure, you think, well, that's pretty good, but it's actually not good enough to meet AOSA standards. And of course, essentially free of noxious weeds and also other materials. Varietal purity of 9.8%. This is for hybrids. That's not really applicable here for the most part. And then there's moisture content ranges which differ from crop to crop. So some technical information, kind of technical stuff that might be a little daunting at first. Growing specs, this is also just lifted straight from our standard contract. Well, we reserve the right to come out to the field and check things out, and we like to do that as much as we can. That would generally be Mike. Oftentimes, Benita, who's our quality manager, will come out to the field and just check things out. We like to keep in touch with our growers and see what they're up to. And the more that we can keep an eye on things, the better it works out for everybody involved. That way, everybody understands what everybody's needs are on both sides. Crop reports, Ira mentioned getting some information from the grower is always good. So we, in an effort to be proactive about that, we send out forms that folks can fill out. That information exchange always works better if you facilitate it in some way for that information that you want. And so we'll send out a form that you can give us an update. Photos are great. Let us know if there are any issues. Something else that occurred to me in a conversation with Sebastian this morning, we were talking about forecasting and that information sharing back and forth. And one thing I suggested to him, he was interested to know if this onion we were producing for him or he was producing for us is still going to be in the catalog in a couple of years. And I said, well, just ask us. Something that's not uncommon is for a seed grower to send us some kind of a spreadsheet that says, hey, can you give me a 3-year outlook on this variety so I can, put it in the farm plan and have a good idea whether or not I'm still going to be doing this for you in a couple of years. And that's kind of puts the pressure on us to get back to you with the number, and we will, because it's to everybody's benefit. And we want to make sure that things are working for our growers, and to the extent that we can help, we're willing to help. But it always helps if someone lights the fire and says, hey, can you get us some forecast information? So that communication definitely goes both ways. What do I got next? So roguing responsibilities. We, again, this communication portion, we, like to be notified if there are off types out in the field. If there's an alarming rate, it's good to know. And if the rate exceeds 3%, then we'll work something out for how to remove the off types. That can sometimes become a very labor intensive thing that adds a lot to the responsibility of the growers. So we work out how to compensate for that. Because a lot of times, in a lot of times it's our fault because our stock seed isn't, maybe as good as we thought it was, and the production's not looking as nice as we had hoped. So some basic isolation requirements. This is just how it's worded in the contract. So this is always up to negotiation to some extent for different crops. And of course, the landscape can be very different from one region to another. These are just some general guidelines that we keep on hand. Some of those distances are pretty great, and I won't get into the whole pinning thing, but I think you're all aware of how that works, and that it, if you're starting out in seed production, it can be challenging to find adequate isolation for crops. And that's something that we do run into from time to time. Tessa was talking about how inventory kills seed companies, and that's a fact. And there are some things that we do in our contracts to help mitigate that on our side anyway. So we have stipulations for overproductions. It's not uncommon to send the stock seed off, grower plants it and gets a bumper crop, and all of a sudden we're faced with receiving a lot more seed than we had expected. And so we work into this some stipulations for overproductions based on the percent of the overproduction, giving us some options on that side. The other thing I was gonna, I had a little note here. Yeah, the other thing I was gonna mention about inventory is that on top of the cash flow issue, there's also this tax problem with it, where when you take that seed into inventory, it's valued at the average sale price, the retail price of the seed. So it actually becomes worth a lot more than what you paid for it. So if you need to destroy a large quantity of seed, it is a huge tax write-off. And I'm not an accountant. I can't get into the weeds on this, and there may be other ways that you can set up your inventory tax structure so that it's different. But how we do it at Johnny's is that when we need to throw out a bunch of seed, it becomes a major tax equation. And there have been instances where we have such a large amount that we don't have room to get rid of it on the books. And so sometimes we end up physically just holding on to seed because legally we can't throw it out until we have freed up the space in our books to do that. So it's another big consideration and another place where inventory can really hurt you, because then you're just taking up space with something that you don't need, and so then you're scrambling to get rid of it. You're going through all your different alternatives. I've had one cucurbit breeding company tell me that they were unloading excess inventory to like some hunting operation in Florida that would like throw seed on the ground and birds would come and then people would shoot them. I'm like, oh my, that's awful. Like, anyway, people go to great lengths to get rid of seed, and you don't want to have to like be digging around for weird stuff like that to try to get rid of your inventory. So some other contract elements, working out who pays for the cleaning and how that cost is absorbed by both parties. And, you know, that is part of that whole kind of risk equation of, you know, how dirty is that seed going to come out and who's responsible for cleaning it. There's a buyout option as well. And Mike could probably tell you a little more about that. The terms of the stock seed transfer, I already showed you some of that stuff. Exclusivity and ownership, this gets into, I don't know, there's a lot of gray area in here, and there's a lot of different scenarios with exclusivity. I'll just leave that. If you have any questions about exclusive contracts and intellectual property, that type of stuff, I'll just leave that for the questioning portion. The delivery requirements are included as well, invoicing and payment terms, and then there's a lot of standard legal boilerplate about dispute resolution and termination and stuff, which you'd see in standard contracts for a lot of different things. I thought I'd give some examples of things that have gone wrong in the past where we've had failures and things that have been repeated in the past and that we hope to avoid in the future. We've had it happen where the grower didn't plant the crop, and that's a pretty big oops.
Yeah, so let's go into some of those. I'll help you know this. So I think everybody in this room knows that Johnny's wants to work with you guys in some way, shape, fashion, because we need you guys as much as you need us, because we cannot physically get all the seed that we want for our customers from the avenues that are out there. There's just not companies producing some of the stuff we want to buy. But what really, you know, the first question I get from you guys usually is, what is the most valuable crop I can grow from you and how much money can I make? That's a little bit of a rough question right off the bat, especially if I don't know anything about you, anything about your farm, anything. And then the first thing we go to is we try to do scale. We try to do a test production or something like that. And the absolute worst scenario I've run into is somebody is really excited about doing something. I give them a crop and then I never hear from them again. Zero. Or you get into even bigger, you think that this problem would just be with small growers, right? I've literally contracted acres of something and go out to see it and they're like, yeah, we didn't get that one in the ground. You didn't get it in the ground? Did you know that before August? You know, so I think we really need to, it's a trust-based system. And I don't think that there's any problem that we've run into where we didn't try to make it right with the grower. When it comes to these learning curves, if we know that you've put the effort in, we're going to try to, at the very least, cover what cost you have into growing that crop. So when you're thinking about getting into growing and you're thinking about starting the relationship with any one of our seed companies, have that discussion in the very beginning. You know, Mike, if this totally fails, am I going to get anything for it? Am I going to be able to work with you guys again? Because even this example that Pete's using, we're not going to stop using you. But I tell you what, if you don't plant your crop twice and you don't tell me, then we're probably going to stop using it. You know, like we're reasonable, but.
So yeah, okay. Other issues. Thanks, Mike. Obviously, the hazards of farming, weather, weeds, bugs, disease, these come up all the time, and crop failures are not unusual at all, and they happen every year. They hurt, but it's part of the thing. Stock seed failure, that's happened to us where we've handed over some seed and maybe it was a little old because stock seed is not sold to customers who are trying to make a living selling produce. Sometimes it's not quite the same. It's not the same quality standards as commercial seed in terms of germination rate, right? So
right, but that's what you guys need to start demanding on our part as seed companies is when we hand you over seed that says stock seed, that's part of our responsibility, and I like the pressure coming back on us because we need to make sure, there are going to be instances where we say, look, this is the last 100 seeds I have of this. Do the best you can. But in general, where we're trying to move at Johnny's, and I know High Mowing do the same thing, is we want to give to you stock seed that exceeds hopefully the standards that we're asking you to produce a crop with. And when it comes to overproductions, I think when you were talking about yield data, we we struggle a lot with yield data, but I know that buyouts and sliding scales and making ways that you're protected on both sides of the equation, but understanding that if we ask for 7 pounds of a tomato and you grow 24, like there's a possibility we're not going to be able to move that for 10 years. So you guys wouldn't want to sit on 10 years of inventory, neither do we. So working together to try to find a solution is a lot better than not having a crop to grow for the next 5 years. So it has to be some give and take.
We've had labor issues come up with our growers where they plant a crop, and then when it's time to harvest it, the labor force that they had available is no longer available, and that's becoming unfortunately more and more common. It's not our biggest problem, but it does happen. The lack of communication is a big one that can, ward off a lot of problems before they really start. The grower being unaware of the isolation requirements, that's been a real bad one. It's not very common, but when it happens, it's pretty much game over for that crop. And it has happened where a grower has put a crop in the ground for us and then has gotten called out because they didn't get pinned or do what they needed to do to be isolated. Post-harvest problems, this is something that I think is going to be a hot topic at this conference. It's getting the seed clean enough to be sold commercially. It's very daunting. There's a lot of specialized equipment, some of which Johnny's doesn't own either. And you can lose a lot of seed in the process as well. So it's very expensive on many fronts, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges facing small scale seed production right now, is getting that seed into a state where folks are going to buy it and be happy with what they get on the consumer side. Getting to the crop to the front of the line at cooperatively operated seed cleaning facilities is just another element to that same problem. If a lot of folks are using the same milling equipment or what have you to clean the seed, and there's a line, then that delays the availability of the seed, and that's a big issue for us. The timing, we pay for all back orders or pay for all shipping on back ordered seed. So if we're getting seed in late and folks are ordering it, we're accumulating a lot of back orders. Then when that stuff flushes through, we're forking over a lot of cash to ship it out. So, and of course, there are some instances where you have a crop where the seed arrives too late for people to plant it. That's a big one with alliums. It's something that we run into maybe more commonly with counter-seasonal productions in the Southern Hemisphere, where pumpkin seeds coming up here in May, and it gets pretty tricky. And then there's a lot of paperwork involved, and I won't get too into the details on that. Some other considerations, I just mentioned the prompt delivery. Be upfront about cost increases. If we purchased something in 2011 and it was a big supply, and then it wasn't till 3 or 4 years later that we bought it again and the price has doubled, it would be nice to have that information beforehand, because it can cause a lot of problems in our pricing, and it can affect our decision whether or not we want to continue with a product. And then I mentioned what I talked about with Sebastian this morning about being proactive with the forecasting thing. That benefits everybody. If we can get you, whatever information you need from us that is helpful to planning your operation, don't hesitate to ask, and we'll do what we can to provide you with information that helps. And if it's a 3-year outlook, I've had folks ask for a 5-year outlook. That sometimes is a little much, but we do what we can. We have a pretty strong forecasting process that it's not difficult for us to get that information. So just ask. And I think, yeah, that's just a slide. So that was all I wanted to do, was just kind of run through some basic contract elements. And I really kind of wanted this to be more about the panel here. So I think we'll.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I am going to go quick though, because a lot's been covered about contracts, the issues. Believe it or not, it is crazy but true that you can have a seed grower, not just who doesn't communicate to you until you visit them expecting to look at the crop and they never got it in the ground, but we actually had a grower who told us all about how good the crop was for a couple of months, but had never gotten it in the ground. Those folks don't get second chances, FYI. It's just, give me a break. So I've got a couple hats. I'm going to talk about the seed contracting that we do and some of the process a little bit here that might be a little different, or some things these guys didn't touch on as much. But I am also a seed grower myself for high mowing. So we have our own farm that runs semi-independently from the company, and I run that farm. And so I'm also pushing back against the company with my other hat on, saying, I can't make any money at that price, you know? Or I've never heard about that variety. How does it yield, and how am I going to be guaranteed that I'm going to be getting paid for this in a way that makes sense? So it's a fun game for me to play when I do that, trying to argue for better prices for a different part of the company. But it's a helpful process to have that push and pull back and forth. And of course, the price that a company pays to a grower for seed, it really helps to know what that grower's cost is. And so Sebastian, for example, grows for us, has a wicked sharp pencil and knows his costs really well. And for us to have a grower say, I'm not making any money at that, but then for them to not know what their costs are, it makes no sense. How do you know you're not making any money? I would love to pay you more if we can come up with a way to do this, but is this costing you 50 bucks a pound and I'm paying you 40? Or is it costing you 30 bucks a pound and I'm paying you 40 and you need to make more? So there's a real importance in being a seed grower to know what your costs are. And because we also are seed growers, we know what the costs are for a lot of these crops. We don't grow all of them by any stretch, but a few species and crop groups we know really, really well. And so we can help support growers who might say, this is costing me 50 bucks, and we're thinking this is costing us 10 bucks when we grow it. So let's talk and support each other. There's been a lot of discussion about contracts, and of course, one needs to have a trust and alignment between the company and the grower. We see the contract as something that supports that, but that needs to be first. We need to be on the same page. We need to be all rowing in the same direction here. The contract for us, we look at as more of a way to identify how we're going to proceed if any number of these 20 things that we've seen happen come up. If you have an overproduction, if you have an underproduction, if the stock seed is messed up, if there's disease issues, these are all things we've experienced. So our contract is built around that experience and trying to have us all be on the same page when those things happen, if those things happen, of how we're going to proceed. So it is not meant to be something that replaces a personal and heartfelt and trust-based relationship. In fact, it's meant to support that, because if you go into something without enough formality to it, and you have a misunderstanding about something and you thought you trusted each other and all of a sudden it's different, that really can sour things, and it doesn't have to happen. So the contract is pretty key for us and really spells things out. For a new grower, if you read the contract from a seed company, it'll give you so much insight into what you're getting into. Because again, it spells out all these possible issues, and it could just scare you away from wanting to do it, or it could lead to lots more questions. Why is this point like that? Or tell me an example of how this has happened in another case. And I find that that dialogue is really, really helpful. We have a lot of folks approach us wanting to grow seed. Actually, everybody who's grown seed for us in here, will you raise your hand? Yay. Thanks. As an organic seed company, we don't have a lot of places in the world where we can buy seed right off the shelf anywhere. And so our own farm and you guys as growers are really key for us. So one of the questions that we haven't talked about a whole lot is scale. It was mentioned a little bit, but as you're thinking about growing seed on your farm and growing it for another seed company, thinking about what scale makes sense for you, the idea of what species, is it a rare variety or a more common variety? Is it tricky? And what scale you're growing it at have so much to do with the final economics of if this is going to make sense or not for you. In terms of gaps around scale, think about all the different varieties that seed companies sell for a category like kale. You know, we have a dozen different kale varieties. Some of them we need growers to produce 50 pounds of, and that's it. Others we need a grower to produce 500 pounds of. Others we need a grower to produce 5,000 pounds of. And so if you think of every single crop like that, that means that no matter what scale you're at, generally, there's a variety that might fit for you, appropriate to that scale. Now, whether it works economically, that's another question. But there are growers who have continued to produce seed for us as we've grown as a business, but they're not producing the same varieties anymore. They're doing something different, or maybe they're producing stock seed, which is, you know, higher value, smaller volume, and needs much more attention to detail. So there's a place, but you as a grower might have to graduate to different varieties or to different relationships as your own business grows and partnerships with the seed companies you work with grow. We are looking for really exceptional quality of seed. There's a few different reasons, and this is an important thing to think about in terms of the seed company you might be growing for. If we sell mostly to small farmers, what they require is really excellent quality. There's disease issues, there's germination issues, there's vigor issues, there's the varietal issues in general. But what that means is that we really have to push those same quality standards onto the people supplying seed to us. And also, we are growing a 2-year supply of seed in most cases when we make a contract with somebody, which means the germination rate really matters because it needs to last for a year or even 18 months and still be above our minimum standards. So in that case, we incentivize growers by having bonuses that can be substantial for higher germination rates than the standard in the contract. There's also disease issues related to that. One of the tricky things when we have folks contact us wanting to grow seed is if they say, oh yeah, I've got 10 acres of vegetables for my CSA and I want to get into doing seeds. And all my red flags go up when I hear that, because those 10 acres of vegetables, not only do they pose issues around isolation and pollination challenges, but those are from seeds that they've bought from seed companies who are sourcing it from all over the world. And we don't know anything about the quality of those seeds and the diseases that those seeds have on them that might not actually affect that vegetable crop, but it might move over to the seed crop that's right there, that is this precious stock seed that we've shared with them. So mixing vegetable production and seed production, especially when there are really high quality standards, can be really tricky. There's the whole attention span thing also about it. Lettuce, when you're a vegetable grower, is like a 2-month crop. It's in and out. If you miss a planting, it bolts or whatever, you're just in and out. If there's a weed problem, big deal, you're in and out. Lettuce for seed is 5 months, 6 months. Radishes for seed can be 6 times, 7 times longer than a radish for vegetable. Weeding is a really different story under those circumstances. Nobody thinks about weeding for radishes, but when you're growing radishes for seed, they're like a tangle and a jungle. If you don't have weed control in the first 6 weeks, you're in trouble. So whole new set of challenges. There are new diseases associated. I sound like I'm not making a sales pitch. I'm like discouraging you, but it's extremely interesting work. I'm just trying to be realistic about some of the challenges too. Yeah, there are whole new diseases you're going to need to know how to identify when you're growing crops for seed. there are insects. There are serious problems with insects out here for certain seed crops that don't really affect vegetable crops at all. So it's a big learning curve for that. The other challenge that sometimes comes in when we have growers who are producing seed for us that are also growing seed for other seed companies, we don't know what the quality of the stock seed they're getting from those other seed companies is. And so if there is a disease issue with that, again, not a contamination in terms of pollination issue, but just another disease issue, then that can end up affecting our crop too. And we've had situations where we have had a crop failure on our crop because of a seed crop that grower was producing for another company that had a disease on it. And that is, I'm sure, posed a challenging dynamic between that grower and that other company. And we tried to not get in the middle of that one, but it meant that it was hard to continue working with that grower. So these are things that are valuable to know about and to have your eyes wide open about, and to make sure that the seed companies that you're working with are doing right by you. They need to give you all the answers to all of your questions. They need to have their stock seed tested for disease. Like, these are things that have a huge consequential loss for you on your farm. Your soil could be infected. Your farm could be infected with a disease that meant that that species is no longer really viable for doing seed production on for 10 years. So it's important to think about that stuff when you get into the seed. See if there's any other points I wanted to mention. There's other quality issues. Increasingly, we've been able to handle a lot of seed quality issues with steam treatment. And that's something that now routinely our stock seed all goes through our steam treatment process. And seed that comes back from some of our suppliers and growers that may have some disease issues, we can also handle. So it's good to prevent as much of this as possible, but it's also good to have some ways to address it when it comes up. So in general, I would say that we as a business are growing. We're continuing to grow. We have varieties that we introduce into the market where we're not sure what the sales volume is going to be. So it could be in the first year we contract someone to grow 100 pounds of it, and quickly after that we need 1,000 pounds. And so you may not stay with that variety if it outgrows your own scale, but if you can grow with us in that way, then it's really exciting, and we love our relationships with growers. I'll also point out Jacob in the back there. Will you raise your hand up, Jacob? So Jacob oversees our contract seed production and is a farmer himself and has been working at Mowing for 7 years and knows a lot about all of our processes. He also is has a big role in facilitating the decisions around adding new varieties and how those are incorporated in. So that's a key part of the seed contracting piece, is adding new varieties and the scaling up of those varieties. Sort of like the status codes that Tessa talked about earlier. When a variety is at that early stage, it's a really different kind of relationship with a grower than when it's at a more mature stage or a really actively growing stage. So again, it's important to get a sense from the companies, like you guys were saying, give me a 3-year forecast of this. We can do that too, and we do that with folks all the time. So I think that's all I wanted to share. Let's open it up for questions. How much time do we have?
Hi, I'm Judy with Botanical Interest Seed Packet Company, and I just wanted to kind of relate with what's being said. You asked if there's a market for growers. I've been doing this for 24 years. There is such a market for growers. I need growers badly. In 24 years, there's been an amazing consolidation in the production arena. So glad to see all you here. We really enjoyed working with a number of you here, and Sebastian has been fantastic to work with. We have even been investing in seed cleaning equipment to help facilitate what you guys are doing, because we understand that you can't necessarily afford the equipment. Scale is kind of a funny game to play. as Sebastian kind of alluded to, you can scale up and do the larger things, but then that increases your risk. So kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about this also. Can't think of what else I was going to say. Sometimes we can work with people who want to get started, because we can put one of your varieties online only, scale up slowly so that you can grow slowly and in a healthy sort of way. And then we can put it into our rack sales and go big. So thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for doing such a great job.
Question for the seed companies. In the face of uncertainty about yield, would you rather have a contract that gets underproduced or overproduced?
I mean, if it's underproduced, we can't sell as much of it as we hope, so we're leaving money on the table and disappointing our customers. I mean, if it's twice as much, that's really different than if it's 5 times as much. Sometimes what we've done is we might get twice as much of a contract coming in, but the germination rate is a little too low, so we'll just clean it really hard, get the germ up as high as possible, so we know that the year 2 or year 3 batch of that seed will still be passing germ and be strong. So I guess I would say over is better than under.
I think over is probably okay, but what we usually do at Johnny's is we're already asking for a 3-year amount to try to get the volumes up to where it's economically feasible for you guys to do it. So if you take that into consideration, you got to be careful about getting into year 4 and 5. I mean, it's one thing if you're growing a tomato, that basically is going to germ well for the next 10 years. Whereas a brassica or an onion, it's just not going to stay alive for that long period of time.
Okay. This question might be for you, Tessa, or somebody else who's in the know. So I'm sure there's a bunch of seed companies here that are looking for new relationships and meeting contract growers, and I'm sure there are people who are contract growing or wanting to get into it who are looking to have conversations. So I'm wondering if there's a synergy room or another way other than like, hey, everybody raise your hands. Like, is there a speed dating session this weekend or something else going on for speed dating? No, it's going to be fast.
I am actually not sure, but I can definitely, I'll find out at lunch and make sure that I make an announcement about it. Right, there is a synergy space that I know you can sign up to and you can propose a topic and then you all can meet, and that's available. But I'll make sure that that isn't already on the books, and I'll let you know after lunch.
Thanks. I'm just wondering, in light of that same question, and given that, we're all here to either buy seed from people who want to produce it or be the people who produce the seed for those that want to buy it, whether the folks at the front of the room and anybody else who's here who's buying seed wants to give some indication of what might be their first contract with somebody who wants to begin to grow for them.
So at Johnny's, this is what I typically do in my role as I find out what crop type the grower is most suited for the region, and then I usually pick a crop that they're comfortable with, say for example tomato, and then I give them a choice of like 3 or 4 tomatoes, probably not the easiest ones, just to see, and then I give them a guarantee, so much per acre, so much per pound, and say, this is the money that I'll give you no matter how the crop grows, as long as you've put in the effort, the plants are grown, you communicate with me, and it tries to cover their costs for the first season. And that way there's very little risk on the grower's part, and it feels like the beginning of a partnership instead of 100% risk on the grower.
Well, we're small, so we're always needing things like pole beans or crowder peas or stuff like that. And so, tomatoes too. There's a lot of tomatoes. And So if somebody is new and they haven't been growing seeds for someone else, so that you can kind of get some references, and they don't live close to someone who already grows seeds from us, because at our scale, having a seed friend who's close by, if they're not close by, is really important. We give them a small contract and see how it goes. And we love people who've grown biennials before and want to grow more. I just thought I'd put that in there.
Similar for us, but one thing I just mentioned about the scale piece, the scale really needs to be matched with the grower. So sometimes we're talking to a conventional vegetable seed grower who we're trying to convince to start doing organics because they are an excellent conventional grower. We want to pair them up with somebody who has good organic ground and have this good match there. And they might be used to doing hundreds of acres, even thousands of acres. So giving them a 5-pound tomato seed lot to do is not a scale that is going to jive with their operation. So sometimes with a new grower, we have to stretch to a larger scale than we normally would do, just to prove the concept and see if it's going to work or not. But otherwise, pretty similar to how the rest of these folks do it. I want to make sure that it's a variety or it's a crop that I want to make sure to know what drives the grower. Is it interest in a particular crop and seeing it through to its whole life cycle? Is it money? Is it being involved and engaged with the seed because it fits into their farm in a different way? Those things, as well as region, scale, familiarity, are all really important too.
Can you all touch on, I'm sorry, can you all touch on like the foundation seed stage and where the breeding material or new material is coming from? Is it more sources that are provided by universities? Is it smaller seed companies that are cleaning and vetting through material? And then, there's genetic modifications or not, or breeding going on from a smaller scale. Is that profitable from a small seed company grower's perspective? Are they cleaning through that and vetting and roguing through the seed material? How do you guys see more sources coming about and where the best sources are?
So foundation seed, we have a whole breeding program and a few different crops, which is a little unique situation, adds another layer to our operation. But anyway, our foundation seed is grown on the farm. Stock seed, most of it is grown on the farm, and Mike could break that down better. But that's kind of the family jewels, and you want to keep that close to home if you can. As far as where those breeding lines come from, it's a mix. We have a lot of our own proprietary stuff that's been developed over the years, or that's derivative of things that are out there and available. And then a lot of it comes from the public programs, Cornell, and we have Oregon state lines, NC state lines, from all over the place. And then there are just, some lines might be popular OP varieties, and that just happens to be a good parent in a hybrid. But on the OP products, it's the selection, right? And so, yeah, why don't you talk about the selection process on our OPs?
So, and I'm sure it's the same with high mowing. We try to, if it's an OP product, we want the stock seed. I think in our contract it says anything above 3% we're going to compensate the grower for. We expect the genetic purity of what we give to you to be that good. What happens if it's a farmer project, you come to us and you say, I've been selecting this. It's kind of your variety. If you're producing on your own, that's where the contracting or contract booking is two different things in our company. If you have a variety that you've been producing and you've been selecting, and it's kind of, now it's different, right? It's not just you've put some type of work into it. That's when we try to work a partnership agreement out. That's where the product managers would come in. If I'm providing the stock seed to a grower, I want all that work to be done, unless you're a really good grower. And then say, for example, we have a breeding program, starting in onions. Maybe I have the bulbs and I'm going to come to you guys and say, I want you to grow out these 400 bulbs. Let's come to an agreed to price. You're going to do this extra work. That's where the value add comes in on the smaller scale items. And that's where some people's business models, they have the resource to do that, which is more labor, more time, and just more mental work that goes into selecting. So I think in general we keep a lot of foundation seed in house, but we are looking for really good growers to do biennial seeds for us that we just don't have the climate to do in the Northeast.
We do a lot of heirlooms, and we really like farmer breeders who are selecting and maintaining heirloom varieties, because a lot of them are kind of messed up. And so that's something. And I guess we're prejudiced toward people who are right close where we can see them in terms of working with any, of our grower stock. So.
Can you guys talk a little bit more about disease testing and sort of how that's developed, the burdens, the challenges, how you typically figure who covers the testing costs, especially on small lots, pounds, maybe some of the brassica types that are really looked at heavy right now, and maybe some of the other seeds that you really typically do not have diseases and such.
Sure. So we test for lots of different diseases, and we cover all those testing costs. That's not something that the grower covers. In the case of brassicas, blackleg and black rot are routinely tested, and because the test uses a lot of seed and has, it's a couple $100 and uses a couple of ounces up to almost a pound of seed in the case of a big brassica like radish. If you have 2 pounds of seed and half of it gets consumed in the test, now you have 1 pound of seed, and you have even more expenses to try to recoup from the sale of that 1 pound of seed. So it does not work. So there are sort of minimum lot values that also correspond to the poundage of the seed before we can even start moving a brassica seed lot. In some cases, 10 pounds of a brassica seed, if it's high value, is still worth us doing the testing on, but that's maybe where the cutoff is a little bit. Fortunately, we've also been able to kill blackleg and black rot with our steam treatment, which means that anytime a seed lot comes in that does have a disease on it, it immediately goes over to my little research pile. And I like diseased seed now more than I like healthy seed, actually. So I'll pay a lot of money for diseased seed, ironically, so that I can try to kill it without killing the seed. So we've had some really good success with that, which is a really good backup to the testing. But keep in mind that the testing should only be there to verify that you've done as much preventative work as you possibly can. And the treatment at the end is only to cover that. But you still need to drive it back and say, why was this infected? How did it get infected? And of course, your stock seed needs to always be clean and tested first. So that can also be very tricky because stock seed is both more valuable and tiny seed lots. So we've had to increase the amount of stock seed we produce just because of all of it we destroy in the tests.